back at the White House right now after being at the U.S. Naval Academy for graduation in Annapolis. He is meeting this afternoon with Mike Pompeo on North Korea. We'll see if anything comes out of that, but he's hard at work as we all get ready for the weekend. I'm Melissa Francis, in today for Harris Faulkner. The Daily Briefing starts right now with Sandra Smith.
Hey, Melissa, thank you. This is a Fox News alert. President Trump leaving the door open for a summit with North Korea, only a day after canceling his June 12th meeting with Kim Jong-un. Hello, everyone. I'm Sandra Smith, in for Dana Perino, and this is the Daily Briefing. President Trump taking a more optimistic tone after the regime said it is still open to talks with the U.S. The president and Defense Secretary Mattis both suggesting the summit could get back on track under the right conditions.
Got some possibly some good news on the Korea summit, where it may, our diplomats can pull it off, may have it back on even.
We'll see what happens. It could even be the 12th. We're talking to them now. They very much want to do it. We'd like to do it. We're going to see what happens.
Meanwhile, the North claiming it demolished its nuclear test site by carrying out a series of explosions and reducing it to rubble. Senior Foreign Affairs correspondent Greg Palka is live in Seoul, South Korea for us. Greg?
Hi, Sandra. The folks here in this region are watching very closely what is being said in Washington and Pyongyang and beyond regarding that possible summit involving President Trump and Kim Jong-un. We heard from the foreign ministry up in China about this. They, in fact, say that the U.S. and North Korea should meet each other halfway. They should stay patient. They should press ahead with denuclearization. Remember, it was President Trump who said that perhaps Chinese President Xi got in the ear of Kim Jong-un and changed his tune. We also heard on Friday from Japanese Prime Minister Abe. He said that a possible cancellation of that summit was regrettable, but he respects and supports the decision. And in fact, he too just wants to see denuclearization on this peninsula. Again, a strong ally of President Trump can be found at the Japanese government office. As for Kim Jong-un, he was seen today via state media from Pyongyang on a train inspecting a rail line. His regime, remember, early in the day on Friday said, in fact, following that supposed possible cancellation of the summit from President Trump, that he and the U.S. should meet face to face anytime, any place. The government here in Seoul also has so much invested in this that they want the thing to go forward as well. As for that big news from yesterday, they got kind of overshadowed by everything else. The nuke test site event, that is the dismantling of the site in the northeastern corner of the country. We've got some new images today from our sister network in the UK, Sky News. They were one of a small group of journalists who were allowed to attend. Pretty impressive stuff. The hitch is, as we've been saying, and as also our Sky News colleagues pressed on the ground, there were no inspectors, no experts, no analysts that could confirm the claims being made by North Korea that they had done the deed. And one last point on that, remember that happened, the dismantling of the nuke site on Thursday, and just a couple of hours later, we heard from President Trump about the summit, canceling the summit, and then today, maybe not. A very moving target here in the region, around the world. Back to you, Sandra.
Greg Palka in Seoul for us. Thank you. More on this. We bring in Nicholas Researcher at the American Enterprise Institute. Nicholas, thank you for joining us this afternoon, where things seem to be quickly changing. As of yesterday, it was off, and then North Korea issued this response. And then today, there's word that maybe it's back on. But as far as we're concerned, as far as the White House has confirmed, this is still off. Does the cancellation of this summit, from your view, increase the risk of a military showdown with North Korea?
This is all part of a long-term dance that the North Koreans are very skilled in. It's a kind of a shakedown diplomacy. You're nice sometimes, and then you threaten your negotiating partner with nuclear war other times. You see if you can jingle some change out of their pockets. I don't think the North Korean side is by any means finished with its attempts to negotiate with Washington.
You know, in your own piece that was published in the Wall Street Journal, you warned, ahead of the cancellation of this summit, you actually warned against treating North Korea like a normal state. Do you think the president, as we heard him today, as he was departing the White House to head off to that commencement ceremony at the Naval Academy, he says everybody plays games. Do you think the president is playing this game the best that this country possibly can at this point?
Well, I think that the president and the administration seem to be quite aware that they're not dealing with a normal government. I think they're quite aware that they're dealing with a government that only keeps its promises when it's advantageous to do so, a government that doesn't believe in win-win, a government that likes we win, you lose sort of diplomacy. Very difficult government to get to yes with. And I think that's what we're seeing now in these beginning stages of what I assume will be continuing discussions between the two sides.
You know, and I ask you about the increasing risk of a military showdown with North Korea as this summit has now been canceled, as Axios is reporting that the U.S. was closer to war last summer than many believed. They are reporting this. H.R. McMaster thought there was a real chance the Pentagon would have to confront Kim Jong-un militarily. The U.S. was preparing for military contingencies with enough specificity that spooked the South Koreans, who were worried enough that they brokered the conversations with the North that led to the summit offer. Is that same dangerous uncertainty, Nicholas, now back?
Well, we have to recall we've been a heartbeat away from a resumption of war in the Korean Peninsula. There's never been a peace treaty. There only was a ceasefire brokered in 1953. The level of tension has always been extremely high due to North Korean intentions. Sometimes we recognize this, sometimes we don't. We should be very clear that the North Korean side's long-term objective is to prepare to fight and win a limited nuclear war against the U.S. and her allies in the Korean Peninsula when they are sufficiently confident they can have such a showdown. And that's more or less what Madam Che of the North Korean Foreign Ministry threatened the U.S. with on Wednesday evening.
You know, I want to transition to some news on the president making this deal with the Chinese President Xi Jinping. This just happened in the last hour on ZTE. This is obviously something you have been following closely, and this is the Chinese telecom company that there's apparently been a deal reached for China to pay upwards of $1 billion, which the president wanted. They've agreed a $1.3 billion fine. ZTE will put in management and an executive board. The company will make security guarantees and will purchase much of its parts from U.S. companies. And the president is telling Fox News in light of this deal that his handling of ZTE shows that he is prepared to be tough on China and Chinese companies when they misbehave.
Well, I think that we could have been even tougher in this situation than we seem to have ended up being. Security guarantees, I don't think, mean much. Reshuffling the board of directors is, I think, kind of a nothing burger. Instead of a sentence of death for this company, which is what would have happened under the existing sanction strictures, the company is paying a hefty fine. We have to remember, this isn't a jobs negotiation for American jobs. This is a company that was caught transferring technology against sanctions to North Korea, which would increase North Korea's capability of incinerating Los Angeles. Until the U.S. Uses its Treasury Department Death Star to make a couple of significant companies in China disappear, I don't think we're going to get the cooperation from the Chinese government that we really need for maximum pressure on North Korea.
Fascinating stuff. That just happening in the last hour. A deal been reached, $1.3 billion fine. We'll keep watching that as well as North Korea. It may be a Memorial Day weekend, but things are quickly changing as we head into the afternoon. We thank you for your time, Nicholas.
Thanks a lot, Sandra.
All right. Well, the attorney for disgraced movie producer Harvey Weinstein says he will plead not guilty after appearing in a New York City courtroom this morning. He's accused of sexually assaulting 2 women. This marks the latest chapter in the downfall of one of the most powerful people in Hollywood. Fox Business Network's Connell McShane's outside the courthouse. You have been outside there all through the morning and all through the day, Connell. So what happens next?
Well, that not guilty plea that you referenced would be the immediate next step. But that same lawyer, Benjamin Brafman, Sandra, also said that he plans to move quickly to try to get the charges against Weinstein dismissed, says that they are constitutionally flawed. However, a number of law enforcement officials here in New York say that, if anything, this may be just the beginning in terms of charges and allegations against Weinstein, since so many women, dozens and dozens of women, have come forward with allegations against this one-time movie mogul. Today's charges involve 2 different women, and they are very, very serious. 2 counts of rape, 1 count of committing a criminal sex act, which brings us back to the year 2004, when a woman alleges that Weinstein forced her to perform oral sex on him, and then the rape charges from the year 2013, when a separate woman says that Weinstein raped her in a room, may have been a hotel room here in New York City. So he faced those charges in court today, then was able to write a check for $1 million, which was his bail that he posted. And Weinstein left the courthouse here, could only travel to the state of New York and or Connecticut, Sandra, as he's wearing a GPS monitoring device before his next court appearance.
Connell, it seemed very clear the NYPD was looking to make an example out of Weinstein.
No doubt. I mean, we were there earlier and we saw what they call in law enforcement circles the perp walk at the first precinct here in Lower Manhattan, where Mr. Weinstein was led out in handcuffs. It was interesting. We'd seen him come in about 20 after 7 in the morning on his own. He was carrying a few books under his arm. But then while he was in the precinct, the detectives made sure to set the stage for his departure. You know, one of them actually came over to us as us reporters were standing there and said he was going to move some of the barriers that the police had set up so that we could get a better shot for our cameras, a better television shot. And then amongst themselves, the police, the detectives, the chief, they actually practiced the walk that Weinstein would do, making sure all the angles were set up right. So the NYPD has been working on this case for quite some time. It's politically charged. The DA here in Manhattan did not bring charges, groping charges that were alleged against Weinstein back in 2015. Many members of the NYPD have been waiting a long time to see this day.
A lot of commotion down there. Media circus for sure. Connell McShane, thanks for covering it for us.
Yeah.
Can't take no more! Can't take no more!
A new debate on the fate of young people who came in the country illegally. Congress struggling to pass a bill on DACA, as a top official at the border has some tough words for the president on his increased security. And a pair of armed bystanders stepping in after a gunman. President Trump's personal attorney, Michael Cohen. The New York Times reporting that Cohen met with a Russian oligarch in Trump Tower less than 2 weeks before the inauguration. They reportedly discussed improving relations between the U.S. and Russia under President Trump and would eventually meet a total of 3 times. Days after the inauguration, another person who attended the Trump Tower meeting apparently gave Cohen a $1 million consulting contract, which is now under scrutiny by federal investigators. Growing uncertainty on immigration reform in Congress. Nearly 24 Republicans siding with House Democrats trying to force a debate on DACA. President Trump maintains he will not sign anything that does not fund his border wall, as a Border Patrol union comes out against the president sending the National Guard down to the border, saying the deployment is, quote, a colossal waste of resources. We have seen no benefit. We generally support the administration, but we're not going to be cheerleading when things are not going well. Matt Schlapp is the chairman of the American Conservative Union. Jammu Green, former candidate for DNC chair and a Fox News contributor. Thanks to both of you for being here ahead of the weekend. So, Matt, those are some pretty harsh words about what's going on down at the border.
Yeah, but they're the words of one union leader who I think is disgruntled a bit with his interactions with the administration. If you actually look at what's happening with the deployment of 4,000 National Guard troops on the border, is they have already picked up thousands of people in just the last 6 weeks who have come across our border illegally. They've picked up huge quantities of illegal drugs, They've got people ready to be deported. So actually, this program has received, or at least achieved, more results in a shorter period of time than previous iterations of this program. So there's nothing but success here with this deployment of National Guardsmen.
Certainly, Jamir, a stark contrast to what this person is saying. About 1,600 National Guard troops were deployed at the border. Jammu, 750 more troops may soon be added in support roles. That total could reach 4,000 based on requests for assistance and what they need, but a colossal waste of resources?
I certainly would take the word of the head of the Border Patrol Union over folks who are thousands of miles away. But this is what happens, Sandra, when you make policy based off of what you watch on television or from just a place of politics. And we're seeing that when it comes to immigration reform. I think we have an opportunity to get legislation passed. If and when Democrats take back the House, maybe the Senate, we have to keep in mind that the last time that we were able to get massive immigration reform passed was under Ronald Reagan. So I really do look to Democrats to look to the president and maybe appeal to his ego in some ways. And certainly the president is going to have to find a way to compromise on this issue. But I think it's something that should be applauded when you have someone who has been supportive of this administration truth-telling, and not to say that he's disgruntled.
I'm sure Matt wants to respond to that, but first I want to show the
I'd like to respond to a lot there.
Yeah, first let's listen to the president this week on the wall on Fox News. Listen.
You actually have 4 different bills. Unless it includes a wall, and I mean a wall, a real wall, and unless it includes very strong border security, there'll be no approvals for me because I have to either approve it or not. There are bills going through. I'm watching 1 or 2 of them. We'll see what happens. But I can tell you there is a mood right now to get very strong border security.
And it's important to show that because Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell is making it very clear. He is not, he's poured cold water on the whole idea of holding a fresh Senate vote on immigration unless he gets something on his desk that the president is willing to sign. And there he was this week, Matt.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. Mitch McConnell said just yesterday that the only way the Senate's going to take yet another week of time to handle immigration, which, as you know, Sandra, they already did earlier this year, and they couldn't find consensus on any version, is if the House does pass something and the president says, I want you to try to get the votes because I'll sign it. And if that happens, Mitch McConnell will make time on the floor. But I think it's very important in all this. Jammu said, we don't really know what's happening on the border. Yes, we do. We know that thousands of people in the last 6 weeks have been taken into custody because of what the Trump administration is doing. It's very important in all of these questions that we actually look at the facts coming from the government. And by the way, these are nonpartisan government officials, and we should take them at their word.
Jamir?
Well, certainly taking the head of the Border Patrol Union at his word and not saying he's disgruntled, because I understand that this administration doesn't embrace truth-telling, but it is important to not just personally attack this gentleman. Because
Jammu, there was nothing in that person's statement that has a fact, but there's no fact in that statement.
And the facts on this, Matt, are that we are experiencing a decades-long downturn in border crossings. That's a reality.
Yeah, because the Obama economy was so weak. You know that's why. People actually left America to go back to Mexico. Can you imagine? Because under Obama, there weren't economic prospects. Under the Trump presidency, there are economic prospects.
All right, Jammu.
Under Obama, he himself deported many more undocumented Americans than many people on the left wanted him to. This is not something that you can credit or blame one administration for, but the opportunity that exists is for Donald Trump to carry this over the line. That's how Democrats should see this.
You hear the music playing. That means I got to wrap you up. Thank you very much, Matt and Jammu. A major drug bust seizing enough opiates to kill 26 million people. Plus Ivanka Trump hitting the campaign trail. So what role could the president's daughter play in the midterms? For their lives after striking 3 women, were struck with a truck on the campus of Portland State University. 2 of those women are now in critical condition at a hospital. Police are still looking for the driver and the vehicle involved. Meanwhile, police say a gunman opened fire inside an Oklahoma City restaurant yesterday, wounding a woman and 2 young girls before a pair of armed citizens shot and killed him in the parking lot. Witnesses describing the chaotic scene.
She and I were talking. We hear gunshots, and, I'm more of a slow reactor. So, I was kind of looking at her. I see her just dart for the door, and I was like, I hear screaming. So, I ran out as well. It was complete chaos. I think people were trampling people to, get out of there. People were scared,
William Lajeunesse has the story from Los Angeles. William?
Sandra, this is pretty amazing to think that you have 2 unrelated men who just happen to be in the same place, see a crime in progress, then independently go to their cars, unlock the trunk, get their handguns out, then kill the shooter, possibly stopping a mass shooting. So here's what happened last night, Oklahoma City. 28-year-old Alexander Tillman walks into a restaurant, opens fire on a child's birthday party. As he is leaving and before police arrive, witnesses say 2 men confront him in the parking lot. When he refuses to drop his gun, they kill him at the scene. Today, those 2 Good Samaritans are credited with saving lives.
We just felt so fortunate that there was someone there who was able to stop it before more people were hurt or killed.
So those 3 victims, a woman and 2 children, will survive, including this man's daughter and granddaughter.
Evidently, the shooter was in the tree line, and they were both shot by the front door. I would love to congratulate them, give them a big hug.
So far, no motive. The shooting appears random. Police say there's no record of mental illness, but they did have an arrest for domestic assault when Tillman was 13. Police say in protecting the public, it is unlikely the DA will prosecute them for endangerment or discharging their weapons in public.
It could have been really tragic. Again, we're very blessed that only 3 people, were just shot and didn't lose their lives.
So again, those 3 shooting victims in good condition, and just like the school shootings, Sandra, that are often used by the anti-gun lobby, today Senator John Cornyn of Texas said, and the NRA put out statements saying, quote, the best way to stop a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. Back to you.
Interesting stuff, William Lajeunesse. Thank you. Well, a busy holiday weekend underway with a record number of travelers expected and drivers facing higher prices at the pump. Will they blame President Trump for that? And could that actually hurt Republicans? Americans hitting the road for the long holiday weekend, kicking off the unofficial start of summer travel season. And the crowds are predicted to be the biggest in more than a decade. At the airports, an estimated 246 million passengers will take to the skies from June through August. More than 2.5 million per day, and 9 million more than last summer. Peter Ducey's live at Reagan National Airport in Arlington, Virginia. Peter, where will travelers face the worst gridlock?
Sandra, every mode of transportation is going to be more crowded this Memorial Day weekend than last Memorial Day weekend. AAA tells us they're expecting 41.5 million Americans to travel between now and Monday. That's 4.7% more in cars this year, 6.8% more on planes this year, and 2.4% more on trains, buses, and cruise ships. And that is even though gas prices are averaging just under $3 a gallon. That is the highest they've been on Memorial Day weekend since 2014.
I think it's clearly the price of oil is rising and the economy is good, and those factors working together are causing a strong demand for oil and gas and a higher price that the refiners are having to pay. And so that's what I think is leading to a higher price.
And AAA tells us they do not expect the high gas prices to keep many people from traveling this weekend. Sandra.
Peter, gas prices are up. Is that having an impact on road travel?
Our crew in California caught up with some people who were at the gas station pumping up, and they heard a little bit of everything.
I just can't afford gas, so I have to pay for gas immediately when I start to run on empty just to get me to the next cheaper gas station, which is absurd, but it's like a puzzle. It's kind of fun, but a waste of money in the end. If I don't have to drive, I have a baby in the back right now. I have the stroller in the car too, and we just walk. I'll park and walk places because this is $4 for gas is absurd.
Get over it, pay for your gas, and move on.
And that's something that flyers don't really have to worry about this long weekend. Air tickets, airline tickets, actually down 7% compared to last Memorial Day. Sandra?
Peter Ducey at Arlington, Virginia Airport for us, the Reagan Airport there. Thank you. Well, higher gas prices raising questions about a possible backlash against President Trump. Politico writing, quote, the increased cost of fuel is already wiping out a big chunk of the benefit Americans received from those GOP tax cuts. And things could get worse as summer approaches following the administration's standoff with Iran and a move by oil-producing nations to tighten supplies. Chris Stirewalt is Fox News politics editor and the editor of Halftime Report. Chris, good afternoon to you.
Howdy, ma'am.
All right, so I don't know, it appears gas prices are on the way up. You know, we looked at the 4-month difference here, and today the average price is $2.97, almost $3. 4 months ago, in January, is $2.56. So if you're filling up an average tank of gas, which is about 12 gallons, you're paying about $5 more out of your pocket to fill that tank.
And if you live out in the country, if you live in a place like where I grew up, people drive a long way to work oftentimes. And the farther west you go in the United States, from here in the Acela corridor, days and commutes are a lot longer than they are for people in these metroplexes. Now, we do know that the Russians and the Saudis are both rethinking whether or not they want to play this game in regard to increased gas prices. However, we know from 2004, 2006, there's a lot of political history to suggest that the higher the gas prices are, the worse it is for the party in power. Even if there's nothing that the party could do to change that outcome, even if it's not their fault, voters take out their frustrations on things that pinch their pocketbooks, and nothing pinches pocketbooks quite like $1 more in gas prices.
And that's just something you see every day. You're in your car and you're driving past the gas station, and you know when they're up. That being said, what does this do to Republicans running on those tax cuts? Because the savings to a middle-class family of 4, with the average income of $85,000, will save $2,250 in their 2018 taxes. Well, with the higher gas prices, you're talking about overall gasoline expenditures of about that much. In 2018, they're expected to be about $2,300.
Well, I would always defer to you on matters of business and economy because you know your stuff. But I think maybe you will back me up on this. We had a stagnant economy for a long time, right? Where growth was in the 2% range. It was slow going. Now we're seeing kicked up growth. Gallup found 2 weeks ago, I think it was, Americans were more optimistic about the chances of getting a good job right now than they had been since they had taken that measure over the past 17 years. There's general optimism, but when the economy gets better, what happens? Inflation that had been in the offing when things were flatter starts to kick in. Prices start to rise, and people feel the pinch. Their dollars don't go as far. So that's one of the consequences when you get faster growth, and we're going to see what the Federal Reserve does. And I guarantee you, Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell are looking very closely at the Federal Reserve. They're looking very closely at all these economic indicators because they know that the overall health, yes, gas is part of it, but the overall health of the economy and the overall cost of that, what do we call that, the basket, the consumer price index basket.
Very good, Chris Stirewalt.
See, I paid attention.
You know, the old adage on the trading floor is nothing cures high prices like high prices, and we're already getting to those levels. In fact, we're seeing a huge sell-off in oil today, down about $3, which is about a 4% drop. So we will see, and sometimes those high prices are just a reflection, to your point, of a strong and growing economy. I got to ask you about Ivanka Trump.
Okay.
What is her future?
Well, she's got a security clearance now, and so does her husband. And they sort of have waited it out. You know, for a period, her brother, Don Jr., was the politically ascendant one in the family, and he was going to go out on the campaign trail and do all this stuff. And obviously, we now know how intimately he was involved with campaign strategy. We've gotten that from the emails that have come out as part of the special counsel's effort. She, in the end, has not been touched by this stuff, and she is a less complicated figure for the family on the campaign trail. I'd say that she is back on the ascendancy, back on the rise. And after maybe an awkward first year or so in Washington, she's getting her feet under her, and she can probably help in districts out in California, like where she's going. She can help what Republicans need very much, which is outreach to educated, more affluent suburban women, because they can identify with her to a degree, and she can identify with them, and that's a connection Republicans are going to need in a lot of districts.
You know, I mean, and she's just been a clear presence along the side of this president. He clearly wants her and needs her by his side. So I think a lot of people are left wondering, you know, what is Ivanka Trump 10 years from now, 20 years from now? What will her role be in Washington?
I wish I could see what was going to happen in November. You can't start asking me about 10 years from now. That's not fair, Smitty.
Everything, Chris Darwell.
No fair.
All right, good stuff. Chris Darwell, have a wonderful weekend. Thank you.
You do the same, my friend.
All right. 2 men who set off an explosion in a restaurant. 15 people were injured when the improvised explosive device detonated in suburban Toronto last night. Matt Finn is following the story for us. Matt?
Sandra, the explosion happened in Mississauga, Canada, which is right next to Toronto. Police are calling it horrendous. They say around 10:30 last night, 2 suspects in hoodies walked into a restaurant where 2 private birthday parties were going on. They dropped off a homemade explosive and then took off. Police say 15 people were hurt, aging in range from 23 to 69 years old. 12 of the victims were released, but 3 victims were listed in critical condition. There were children under the age of 10 inside when the explosive went off, but fortunately police say none of those children were hurt. The obvious questions of who these guys are and why they did this still unanswered by investigators. So far, police have not labeled the attack terrorism or a hate crime, but it is still early in the investigation and that could change. Here is the city's mayor.
Let me just say, if I may, that my thoughts and prayers are with the victims. I'm thankful that there were no fatalities. This is certainly not anything you would expect to happen in Mississauga, not my Mississauga. This is not the Mississauga I know. I will say that this is a heinous crime that's been committed. Police are actively investigating the scene, as you can see, and we ask that anyone with any information, please come forward and tell the police. Certainly the people who have done this need to answer for their crimes, and they need to be brought to justice.
Police say they've cordoned off areas in Mississauga looking for the suspects where they thought they were, but right now at this hour, those 2 men are still at large. Sandra.
Matt Finn reporting for us from Chicago. Thank you. New details on yet another school shooting, what police say a student did after being excused from class. Plus, the House passing a huge bill to fund the military. General Jack Keane is here with analysis on what is being added and what is being cut. But first, here's President Trump.
We are going to be stronger than ever before. We will have the strongest military that we've ever had, and it won't even be close. And when did we need?
Just a day after President Trump canceled his meeting with Kim Jong-un over what he called open hostility from North Korea, he tweeted about good news from the North. I'll talk to a foreign policy expert about whether he thinks the summit could still happen. That's coming up when I fill in on Shepard Smith reporting.
New details on a shooting at a middle school near Indianapolis this morning. Police say a boy asked to be excused, then returned to class with 2 handguns. He then shot a student and a teacher before being taken into custody. The injured teacher reportedly tackled the shooter, knocking his weapon away. There's no word on the severity of the injuries. Police believe the suspect acted alone. The attack comes a week after the shooting at Santa Fe High School in Texas that left 8 students and 2 teachers dead. Well, the House passing a massive defense spending bill yesterday, calling for $717 billion in defense spending. President Trump explaining his commitment to the military during a commencement address at the Naval Academy this morning.
We have ended the disastrous defense sequester. No money for the military. Those days are over. Next year, we're committing even more to our defenses, and we're committing even more to our veterans, because we know that the best way to prevent war is to be fully prepared for war.
Retired 4-star General Jack Keane, chairman of the Institute for the Study of War and a Fox News senior strategic analyst general. Always good to see you. Thanks for being here. Sandra. So the bill, first of all, do you like it?
Oh, yeah, very much so. This is the second installment on an increased budget. And what we're trying to overcome, Sandra, is the smallest military in 70 years. Our pilot training isn't right. We don't spend enough time training the other forces. There's a technological gap that has closed, and Russia and China have similar capabilities that we have, and in some cases they have advanced capabilities. And most significant, Sandra, every service chief has provided testimony to the Congress saying this: we are at high risk to win a conventional war with Russia and China. We have never made a statement like that in over 40 years.
I want to get to what's in and what's out. First of all, what's in this House spending bill?
We're going to grow the military, so more troops, more ships, more airplanes. We're going to provide spare parts for all of our equipment that have been broken, and we've been cannibalizing taking from one piece of equipment to another as opposed to using the supply system to repair them. And one of the most significant things that's in this budget is we're going to fix our nuclear program, which has been atrophying for years, and our adversaries, Russia and China, have upgraded theirs, and they're in very good shape.
What's not in here that the 7 Republicans broke with their party to oppose this bill? What was not in it that they didn't like? I mean, what did they oppose to this? Everything you've just laid out, I think the American people would be a big fan of.
I don't know what their issue is. I mean, I think there's something else that's in the budget. There's Congressman Thornberry, the chairman of the House Armed Services Committee. There's some reform in the budget because we have a number of agencies. You know, they're sort of the back office. Yeah. And he's cutting those agencies and bringing them down. We have grown the civilian infrastructure in the defense budget rather dramatically over the years. And anybody that looks at it says, we've bloated it and we've got to cut back on it. Now, there's unions that push on this, and there's constituents that push on it, and there's congressmen that push on it. But we're making some progress there.
Well, you heard loud cheers at the Naval Academy this morning when the president was talking about just that. I want to move on to Iran because they are now pressing the European Union on measures to salvage this nuclear deal and how to make up and compensate for the U.S. pulling out of it.
Yeah. Well, listen, it took us 16 months to get to the point where we pulled out of the deal, and the president gave his advisors all that time to see if we could work something out with the Europeans to fix the deal. We came close, but we didn't get there. So what's going on now? Well, the Iranians want the Europeans to stay in the deal. Here's the choice the Europeans are going to have to make. Are they going to do business with a $19 trillion economy that the United States has, or are they going to do business with a $400 billion economy that Iran has? And also, Iran is a repressive rogue regime trampling over people's interests in the Middle East. This will take months to fold out here, not to the end of the month like the Iranians are suggesting, but I'm convinced the Europeans are going to come with us eventually.
Very interesting stuff. And then these new Iran sanctions. Tuesday, 5 people tied with supplying weapons to Yemen and Saudi Arabia. And in the latest, the U.S. is now targeting airlines over this Iran's in these sanctions. 4 Iranian airlines are now being sanctioned.
Yeah, we're going to get really tough with these sanctions. It'll take us over 6 months to get them all in place. Some fall in within 90 days, and then some others it's 180 days or 6 months. But when we get there, the Iranians are going to feel it. Why? Their economy is struggling. Their currency is literally in the tank. They are overstretched because they're in Syria, they're in Iraq, they're in Yemen, and their people at home have already demonstrated their unrest and how frustrated they are. They don't want to pay for those problems that are going on out there in Syria and Iraq and Yemen. They need to take care of themselves at home, and that's the pressure on the regime. I think that the president's decision was the right one, and there's going to be enormous pressure on this Iranian regime here.
A lot of big decisions to make. General Keane, thank you.
Yeah, good
Thanks
talking to you, Sandra.
Have a great weekend. Meanwhile, millions of Americans are hitting the road for this holiday weekend and beaches and barbecue. So will the weather actually cooperate? That is always the big question. We're going to have your forecast coast to coast.